What if the thing falling apart in your life right now is actually the thing saving you? Not destroying you. Not punishing you. Saving you. Because sometimes God doesn't remove you from the storm immediately. Sometimes He allows the shaking, so you finally stop building your life on things that cannot hold your future. And I know that sounds hard to hear when your heart is tired. When relationships feel uncertain. When plans collapse. When doors close without explanation. When the version of your life you imagined suddenly stops making sense. But stay with me. Because by the end of this message, you're going to understand something powerful. The collapse you fear may actually be the beginning of the life you prayed for. There's a kind of exhaustion people don't talk about. Not physical exhaustion. Soul exhaustion. The kind where you smile around people, but feel empty when you're alone. The kind where you keep functioning, keep showing up, keep saying, "I'm okay," while quietly carrying anxiety no one sees. And maybe lately, something inside you has felt unstable. Not dramatic. Just off. The things that used to comfort you don't comfort you anymore. The routines that once distracted you now feel hollow. The relationships you kept forcing suddenly feel heavy. And the hardest part? You don't fully understand why. You just know something is changing. And change terrifies us when we cannot control it. Because humans would rather stay in familiar pain than walk into unfamiliar freedom. That's why people stay in places that drain them. That's why people hold on to relationships long after the love is gone. That's why people keep rebuilding old versions of themselves that God is trying to tear down. Because familiar feels safer than unknown. Even when familiar is suffocating you slowly. But hear me carefully. God will never allow your comfort zone to become your permanent prison. Eventually, He starts shaking the walls. Think about the people of Israel standing at the Red Sea. Behind them was Egypt. Slavery. Bondage. Pain. But strangely enough, some of them wanted to go back. Why? Because slavery had become familiar. And sometimes familiarity feels safer than freedom. Ahead of them was uncertainty. An ocean they could not cross. A future they could not understand. And in that moment, fear made them romanticize the very thing that once broke them. Doesn't that sound familiar? How many times have you wanted to go back to something simply because it was comfortable? Even though it hurt you. Even though it limited you. Even though deep down you knew you had outgrown it. But then God speaks one sentence. Stand still and watch. Not panic. Not force. Not control. Watch. Because sometimes the greatest miracle happens when you stop trying to save yourself. And maybe that's exactly where you are right now. Trying to hold together something God is already asking you to release. Trying to force clarity before trust. Trying to rebuild a house heaven already marked for demolition. Listen carefully. When God begins changing your life, the first thing He disrupts is false stability. Because false stability looks peaceful, but it keeps you spiritually asleep. And that's why the shaking feels so personal. Because it touches the areas where you built identity instead of trust. Think about Joseph. From the outside, his life looked cursed. Betrayed by brothers. Thrown into a pit. Sold into slavery. Falsely accused. Forgotten in prison. If you only saw the middle of the story, you would think God abandoned him. But what if the pit was preparation? What if the prison was training? What if every closed door was positioning him for a future he could not yet see? Because Joseph did not rise despite the breaking. He rose through it. And maybe that's what's happening to you. Maybe the shaking is not proof that your life is collapsing. Maybe it's proof that your old life can no longer contain who you're becoming. Because God will never pour your future into foundations built from fear. He must rebuild you strong enough to carry what's next. And that process hurts. Because growth always requires separation. You cannot become new while clinging to what keeps you small. And I know part of you is exhausted. Part of you wants certainty before movement. You want the entire map before taking the first step. But God rarely works that way. Abraham was not shown the full destination. He was simply told, "Go." Peter did not walk on calm water. He walked on water during a storm. And the moment he focused more on the waves than the voice calling him forward, he began to sink. That's what fear does. Fear makes you stare at the storm until you forget who told you to walk. I want to speak directly to the version of you that feels tired of being strong. The version that carries everything silently. The version that keeps helping everyone else while secretly falling apart inside. You built walls because you thought survival depended on them. And for a while, those walls protected you. But eventually, protection becomes isolation. And isolation becomes loneliness. And loneliness becomes numbness. You stopped expecting too much because disappointment hurt too deeply. You stopped dreaming boldly because life humbled you repeatedly. You stopped opening your heart because every scar taught you to stay guarded. But surviving is not the same as living. God did not create you merely to endure life. He created you to become fully alive. And sometimes the reason your old life feels uncomfortable now is because your soul has already outgrown it. Like a child trying to fit into clothes from years ago. The clothes are not bad. They simply no longer fit who you've become. And what's happening right now is not destruction. It's separation. God is separating you from identities, fears, attachments, and environments that cannot enter your next season. That's why some people drift away. That's why some opportunities disappear. That's why some prayers seem delayed. Not because you're forgotten. Because you're being redirected. And one day, you'll look back and realize. The closed door protected you. The delay prepared you. The silence strengthened you. The shaking saved you. So if your life feels uncertain right now, do not panic. A shaking foundation does not mean God abandoned you. It may mean He loves you too much to let you stay where you are. The cracks are not proof that you are broken beyond repair. They are proof that light is finally getting in. Every tear you cried in secret mattered. Every unanswered prayer was heard. Every lonely season carried purpose. None of it was wasted. And someday soon, you're going to stand in a life that finally makes sense. A life with peace that doesn't disappear overnight. A life built on something deeper than fear. A life where you no longer need to force what God never intended you to carry. But until then, do not run backward just because forward feels unfamiliar. Stand still. Trust Him. Even here. Even now. Because the God leading you is already standing in the future you're afraid of. He already sees the road. He already prepared the way. And what feels like collapse today may become the greatest rescue story of your life. If this message spoke to you, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who feels like their world is falling apart right now. Because they may not realize it yet. But the shaking could be the saving. Amen.